Again from the No Labels, No Walls Festival in windy Helsinki. My name's Daniel, and we all welcome you to this great festival with so many events that we're really enjoying. Lots of diversity of opinion and all types of things. Okay, so while there are millions of people who drink too much, there are also a great many people who are affected by someone else's alcoholism. This is a talk about how growing up with alcoholism can affect living, learning and educational processes over a lifetime and what we can learn from it.
Lifelong learning is a central paradigm of today's knowledge society and defines professional life. From a biographical point of view, the professional life cannot be separated from the biography of a person. The biography is characterized by patterns of interpretation and behavior, which were learned in childhood and which create the conditions for lifelong learning. In families where alcohol is abused, these conditions may not be met, leading to fragmented CVs and/or breaks in the biography of adult children. Hi, my name is Pia Hyppönen. I'm here today to talk about alcoholism. Thank you so much for inviting me to We Are One, and I hope you can take something with you, and maybe whatever I tell you will help you a little bit. I have a master's in adult education and lifelong learning, and I partly speak from my own experiences and partly on research that I have done. And I'm here to share what I have researched and found out during my master's thesis. I'm a late bloomer in terms of education. I got my bachelor's degree when I was 43, and I got my master's degree when I was 50. There were 5 of them, 5 women, and they all had grown up in alcoholic homes, so they were affected by other people's alcoholism. And they visit Al-Anon, which is a 12-step fellowship for friends and families of alcoholics. Because it's difficult to ask children about the alcoholism in their home, I thought it might make sense to talk to people who have reflected on growing up with alcoholism and who can talk about their experiences and their feelings. Alcoholism and education is not looked at very much, especially not in terms of people affected. And that is a general problem, I think, in the alcoholism discourse, that the focus is on the alcoholic, not so much on the people around them. But it is a fact that 5 to 7 people on average are affected by somebody else's drinking. They also affect the alcoholic. So it's a systemic problem. I think it makes much more sense, or it would make much more sense, to put more focus and education into those who are not using the drug, but who are actually a bit more clearer-minded. Having said that, it's a holistic problem. It affects body, mind, and spirit. And just because a person is not drinking doesn't mean that they don't have the ism. It's a generational problem. It goes over generations. It is passed on from generation to generation, and it can jump over a generation. Just because your parents have never drunk doesn't mean you might not become an alcoholic. And just because your parents were both alcoholics doesn't mean that you will drink. You might never touch a drop. And you might get married to somebody who never touches a drop. And then you'll be surprised because your child is an active alcoholic. One thing needs to be said, no matter what parents do, most of the time, they do the best that they can with the tools that they have. I think that's really important. This talk is not to shame anybody or to say, ooh, you're bad, you're guilty. No. This talk is all about taking responsibility for your own life. If you grew up in an alcoholic home, you might have some good experiences and you might have some bad experiences. But if you're not happy with the way your life is going, you do have choices. And that is something alcoholic children often don't know. Because the alcoholic world is a world of isolation. You do not talk about it. It's a big taboo. You keep it a secret. And so if you're locked off in your own little world and only get certain impact, that is what you bring out into the world. And I think the reason for that is that the drinking as such is just a symptom. And what's being passed on with the drinking is also what in biographical research is called patterns of interpretation and action. And those are important in terms of passing on anything, because we constantly interpret and then act accordingly. I know many women, and me included, who had problems with men at a certain point, and for a while at least, every single man was a potential aggressor. If we don't get out of those patterns of interpretation and action, nothing will change. No matter what the ism is, be it sexism, alcoholism, racism, an important part of learning is reflection, and as such, self-reflection. And we need to reflect. We need to become aware. What am I thinking? And what's going on right now? What am I feeling? What's going on? Where am I? The idea is to become aware of our thoughts and through our awareness act differently. Or that is what these people that I talked to did when they came into 12-step meetings to recover from being affected by somebody else's drinking. Alcoholism affects everything around the drinker. It affects the whole system. So it's a holistic and systemic problem. Alcoholic homes can be very different. They can be very quiet, they can be very chaotic. But what children learn most of the time is to pay attention to the alcoholic, to tiptoe, to work on eggshells. A lot of people were talking about criticism, either explicit or implicit, but there was this constant feeling of having to be perfect. If I do it perfect now, then mommy won't do this. Or if I do this perfect, then daddy won't drink or they won't leave. Being very nice. Just don't make havoc. Be peaceful, be quiet, do not be seen. You should carry everything on your own shoulders. And that's another thing that adult children or that children learn. You carry the responsibility. You're responsible for everything that is going on. Do not take up too much space because the alcoholic is the focus of attention. So in terms of relationship, they learn rather to take care of the other person rather than of themselves. You learn your role. It could be that people learn to tiptoe. And so adult children might get involved either with addicts, or they might get involved with another adult child. They don't necessarily have to drink. It could be that they eat, they have eating disorders, gambling, mobile phone, the latest, sex addiction. You know, the alcohol is just a symptom. But what's going on between your ears is important, and there's a lot of control, manipulation. It's very common that there's a sense of perfectionism, and at the same time, the inability to actually stick with something and to hold on to something and to continue from beginning through to end. People chose their field of study according to their fears. They were fear-driven. They were not based in, oh yeah, that's really interesting. It was more, okay, I'm afraid of people, so how can I avoid the people? Which field of study is the least frequented? And that's where I'm going to go. Is that the right way to choose your way of your life, your profession? One of them had fainted during a presentation at school because of the stress that she experienced at home and the pressures, and that came with her into her studies, and she decided, rather than going into marketing, to go into bookkeeping. You don't have to do presentations when you do bookkeeping. Alcoholism is nothing to be ashamed of. It is nothing that is a question of morale. Yes, your morals go out of the window if you drink too much, but it is not because you're a bad person or because you're doing bad things that you're drinking or somebody is drinking. Alcoholism is not something that people who really suffer from it do because they like to. They do it because it's an addiction, and it's very powerful. As it is a systemic problem, it takes two to tango. You have the alcoholic, who's affecting the enabler or the person close to them in some way, but there's also the enabler who affects the alcoholic, who gives them what they need, who lies for them, who pays their rent, who brings them food or whatever, who doesn't talk about it, who keeps it a secret. Well, I don't think you can prevent alcoholism. Somebody who wants to drink and who is an alcoholic will drink no matter what, and they will find their own bottom. So that already is one worry less off the shoulders of people who are dealing with active alcoholics. You cannot change it. Take care of yourself. So rather than focusing on the alcoholic, it is really important to focus on those around them. But in order to be able to focus around them, it has to become more open. It has to be more acceptable that alcoholism is a problem like diabetes or whatever. People talk about all kinds. People talk more about their sex life than about what's going on in terms of drinking alcohol in their homes. Burnout is also a question of not knowing your boundaries or not respecting your boundaries. And that is what children should learn in childhood. You know, say no. It's a full sentence. You do not have to accept somebody else's touch. Me too, right? For learning, we need time, we need space, we need some guidance, we need routines, we need to sit with it and bite through it and come out at the end of it. We need to stretch the learning muscles. Being happy and joyful definitely helps. When we sing a song and learn the words at the same time, that definitely helps. Fear, panic, mistrust, uncertainty, a lack of routines, noise, panic, all that is not helpful when it comes to learning. I believe that the world could be a much better place if everybody had the right and the choice to really follow their heart. But if you're afraid all the time, if you grew up full of fear, and that is what those women actually reported, that there was a lot of fear, loneliness, panic. If you grow up with that, there is not a lot of room for expressing yourself and becoming who you are, because you actually don't know who you are, because you were never given the space to be who you are, because you always had to focus on the other person. So you see, it's a vicious circle. So rather than trying to fix the alcoholics, it is important to teach children and adults, and that is what the best news about it is, that it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always learn new things. You know, adult education should be about finding yourself, being true to yourself, fulfill your purpose, do whatever makes your heart sing, whatever rocks your boat. It shouldn't be just about further education for the job market. That's what I believe. Neuroplasticity means that we can reshape our brain every day at any given time. And the more you do, the more times you let the synapses fire, the broader the pathways will become. It's like anything we learn, but you know, our learning has no end. There was a time when people thought, okay, when I'm 50, the brain shuts down and you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, etc. That's not true. And that is the good news and the bad news. Because the good news is we can change whenever we feel that it's time for a change. Whenever we feel this way of dealing with my life doesn't work for me anymore, we can do something differently about it. That's the good news. The bad news is that having to constantly learn and being fit for the work market, etc., human capital, keeps us imprisoned. Unless we actually know what we really want. What happens in these meetings is that learning takes place. So I came to consider them as places of adult education because they fulfill certain criteria that are defining places of adult education. You can find them online. You know where to find them. They happen every week. They're set up in a certain way. There are certain routines. Routines are really important for learning. If you grow up in an alcoholic home, you might have, if you have a very managing mother, for example, who doesn't drink herself, you might have a certain routine. You might get your breakfast in the morning. But if you don't have a managing mother who holds everything together, like one of the people told me, you might be in trouble. If you're lacking the routine of getting up, brushing your teeth, having breakfast, going to school, coming home, doing your homework, having supper, brushing your teeth, read a good night story, you know, little routines throughout the day that give children a framework in which they can feel and move freely. That's very, very important. But if you have never gotten it from your own family, if you have never learned it, how on earth are you going to pass it on? We can only pass on what we have gotten. They are visiting 12-step meetings, Al-Anon, for friends and families of alcoholics. And what they gotten there the first time for many was a sense of calm and peace. They could just breathe. They could just be. They didn't have to be perfect. They could just sit there and take in and listen. And they had a space and a time to share and talk. Very important. Listening to each other. If we look out into the world, nobody ever listens to each other. We talk, me, me. But do we listen? So that's what they learn there. They learn to take up space. They learn to accept themselves and others. They learn to listen. They learn to reflect on their own experiences of what brought them there. And they learn to also create a vision for themselves. What do I actually want to do with my life? Am I happy with the choices that I made? Am I happy in my profession? Am I happy with the subject that I studied? Is that really me? It is also about asking for help, which I have talked to people in Finland, family members of alcoholics. They suffer from the disease of strength, which means you do not ask for help. All the women that I talked to did, in the end, things that they actually wanted to do. One finished her studies and became a teacher and is working as a teacher now. Another one had a dream of actually doing something that was really interesting, that she was interested in, and studied psychology. Another one gave up all the courses that she had booked because she realized, no, I'm okay the way I am. I do not have to learn again and again and more stuff in order to be who I am or to be okay. So the directions that people can take are very varied, and I think it is important to be true to yourself and to sit with yourself, to accept yourself, warts and all. And only through the acceptance of self, first I need to become aware. Oh, that's not good. Oh, whoa, what am I doing? Or this is not okay. I don't want to do this. And then move into the acceptance. We cannot give away what we don't have. So I need to accept myself the way that I am or the way I do something. I cannot just say, oh no, I don't want it, and then run away from it. That's the addiction. What I need to do is accept myself and then think, okay, what could I do differently? And then do that. And I know that sounds much easier said than done, but it is possible. It is important, I think, already to start from the beginning to empower children, to show them that it's totally okay to have their own opinion, to have their feelings. Most of the people that I talked to reported that feeling their feelings was not allowed. But emotions are really important in learning. Happiness keeps your mind open. Fear closes the mind. So basically what I think, what's much more important than warning children or teenagers about the effects of what happens if you drink, because teenagers usually, teenagers will try at some point, they will try out drugs and alcohol. And no matter what you tell them. I think what's much more important is to empower children from the get-go and allow them to say no, and to learn to speak about their feelings, and to learn to be mindful of themselves and others. And for adults, it's the same thing. We can learn it no matter how old we are. We can learn anything. Something that children in alcoholic homes don't learn is to have conflicts and to discuss things. Very often they just learn to shut up and not say anything for the sake of peace, of not shaking the boat too much, because right now it's really quiet and calm, so let's just leave it there. I think sometimes it's important to bring things up and to talk about them. And that also can be learned. So I think it's important not just for children to learn that in schools and in universities. I think self-care should be a topic in schools and in universities, no matter what you study. Self-awareness as being part of it. But also for adults at the workplace or wherever, to become aware of yourself, to learn to care for yourself. Because only if we care for ourselves can we also care for our world, no matter how big or small it is. If I now then again compare the world as it is to alcoholism, we're heading towards a rock bottom. And Corona is a kind of crisis that gives us the chance to look at ourselves. With Corona and everything else that is going on at the moment, if I translate what usually needs to happen in alcoholic behavior and bottom and recovery, this is what we're going through at the moment as a world. And we need to stop. We need to sit down and reflect. We cannot afford passing on old patterns of interpretation and action. We need to stop. We need to breathe, and we need to consider different options. Thank you very much for listening. I hope there was something there for you. If you're interested in talking to me or sending me an email or even sharing your experiences on growing up with alcoholism and the effects on learning and education, I'd be very interested. I'm writing a book at the moment, so I'm interested in hearing from other people. So thank you very much and have a good day. Bye.